type of systems does not work very well. We all know that. I think there's very few people in the information security arena that would tell you that intrusion detection systems currently work very well. This is because of two problems. One problem is that people consistently try to have intrusion detection system do something else than what they're designed to do. And second part is people selling intrusion detection system have sold them as being able to do things they are not able to do. There's a lot of misuse detection vendors that will swear on a Bible that their intrusion detection system can detect zero-day attacks. Zero-day attack is an attack on an undisclosed vulnerability in the common parlance of people in information security. A misuse detection system needs a description of an attack in order to catch that attack. So if you have the description, that attack is not a zero-day. So where's the trick? The trick is that they redefined what they call zero-day attack. They call zero-day attack an unknown exploit against a known vulnerability. So they detect attacks against that vulnerability, and they are able to detect also new exploits for that same vulnerability, which is, yeah, it's good. It's something they were supposed to do from the beginning, but it's not zero-day attack recognition. The only way to recognize efficiently attacks that have not been described before is to have an anomaly detector, a system that can flag anomalous behavior without describing attacks. A system that flags anomalous behavior by using, for example, statistical means, learning algorithms, whatever you want. Why is this type of algorithms capable of detecting zero-day attacks? Because it doesn't need as an input the description of attacks. But on the other end, so if these anomaly detectors are so much more powerful than misuse detectors, why aren't we using them? Why is there just a couple of vendors of somehow anomaly-based detectors on the market? Well, because building good anomaly detectors turns out to be difficult. So we have a simple solution to the intrusion detection problem, being misuse detection, which does not solve the problem. On the other hand, we have a complete solution of the problem, anomaly detection, which is difficult to do. So if misuse detection is a bad idea, and it's a bad idea for a number of reasons, the first and foremost being the one I already stated, it cannot recognize zero-day attacks. It cannot recognize unknown vulnerabilities being exploited. It cannot recognize vulnerabilities being found on your custom application. If you have a custom web application, and almost every shop in the world nowadays has one, or more than one, and it's critical, you will want that application to be protected. But your average misuse detector cannot detect attacks against a custom application. Yeah, it can detect some forms of attacks based on generic signatures. But since generic signatures usually are the ones most prone to false positives, to generate huge tons of false positives, first thing you will do when you receive an intrusion detection system will be to turn off the generic signatures because they generate false positives. Also, attacks are polymorph. If I write a signature for a web-based attack, for example, and the web-based attack can be exploited through the use of UTF-8 encoded characters, you have as much as 9 different encodings for each character in the string. So I have a choice. Either I canonicalize the strings, so every time my intrusion detection system detects this is an URL, so canonicalize it, see what it means in standard language, and try to apply the pattern recognition on the canonicalized string. Or you have to generate a huge amount of different signatures, which is evidently unfeasible. But there's a lot of other ways of making attacks different. Think of add-mutate. Add-mutate is a very well-known concept. Add-mutate picks up the payload of your average buffer overflow attack, encrypts it, prepends a decryptor to the payload, and then executes the decryptor, and the decryptor decrypts the payload and executes the payload. That's a very clever idea. K2, Canadian hacker, created this idea some years ago, 1998, I think. This idea, if you ask to any anomaly, any misuse-based detector vendor, if they are able to detect add-mutate, they are. Why? Because they detect the decryption procedure, the part of shellcode which decrypts the rest of shellcode. But it's obvious to me and to you and to everyone that I could write a different program, a different set of opcodes, which does something very similar to add-mutate, but as long as it's not the same routine, all these signatures will be useless again. So, and so on and so on. We have generic signatures that match long sequences of knobs, 0x90, in whatever packets you are seeing through your network, because a long sequence of knobs usually is a sled for a buffer overflow. A clever attacker will substitute that with a jump to next, JMP 0x00, and will obtain the same result with a different instruction. And it will have a lot of different ways to combine these things. Whatever pattern you put into your signatures, it will find a way to go around it. I will also point out that besides specific ways to polymorph an attack, many misuse detection systems still nowadays are vulnerable to the attacks described in the great work by Thomas Ptacek and Tim Newsham, 1998 still. It's 2006. 8 years have passed. If you pick up and fragment some packets and then try to send them with wrong alignment and some tricks at network level, most of times you can successfully find a way to evade your ISS, snort, or whatever probe. So this is obviously a huge problem. But my point in this is that if we want, why did we want to have intrusion detection system in the first place? We wanted a complementary system, a system that can detect when other systems fail. When will probably our security systems fail? When an unknown vulnerability or a custom vulnerability is used against us. So, when are misuse detectors useless? Exactly in the moment where we need them most. So, it is my opinion that, well, I wouldn't say that money slated on intrusion detection systems will be better spent on firewalls. But surely, misuse-based systems are not the solution, or are not a complete solution to our problems. So why are we stuck with misuse detection? Why don't we use anomaly detection all the day? Trouble is, doing anomaly detection is difficult. I've been studying how to do anomaly detection for the whole of my doctoral studies. And I've read tons of paper about how to do anomaly detection. It's a very hard problem, because if you just think about it for a moment, if I give you the task of describing the normal behavior of a computer system, how do you do that? Which variables do you take into account? which features, we call them features, do you analyze? CPU activity, network activity, distribution of different types of protocols on the network, inbound to outbound rates of packets. There's an infinity of features and variables that you can measure on a system. And the more complex the system is, the more difficult these variables are to get in the first place, to measure. And in the second place, once you have these variables, how do you fit them? There's a lot of papers and there's a lot of products even that are based on the idea of, well, I do some statistics on that. Yes, but what? I just look to the average and to the standard deviation and blah, blah, blah. And I just look to this data and I put it on a neural network, a genetic algorithm, whatever, and look, it detects some attacks. More on this point later. But in general, you can understand that it's difficult to describe the normal behavior of one of these variables. Also, misuse detection systems usually do not generate a huge load of false positives. If you have false positives on a misuse detection system, you have written a wrong rule. On the other hand, anomaly detectors generate by their nature false positives. So if you want to go down the anomaly detection path, you know you will accept a huge load of false positives. And sometimes they are not even false positives. Because if I design an anomaly detector to work on the network, and suddenly, one day, a person in my office shows his colleague a new game, a new multiplayer game, and everyone begins to play this multiplayer game, and this multiplayer game uses some kind of wired protocol my system has never seen before. By the end of the day, my system will be blinking and shouting that there's some anomaly going on. Is it wrong? No, it isn't. It's anomalous. It's different than what it has seen before. Is this an attack? Usually not. So you have to deal with false positives, and you have to reduce them. Usually you reduce them through the careful setting of thresholds. But there's a basic problem of anomaly detection. It is that if you choose the wrong variables or the wrong model for these variables, your system will be blind. Just think of a detector which detects oscillation in bandwidth, most simple form of anomaly detection on a network. If I make it sample my network at 5-minute intervals, which is admittedly stupid, but it's an example, and the oscillation takes place in the middle of one of these intervals, then it will be canceled out by the rest of time. So if I only look at averages, I will never see anything. This is true in a more complex way. If you choose the wrong variables or the wrong models to fit the variables, even if the variables are correct, a wrong model will make your system blind. Trouble is,